You are listening to The Vocal Technologist. Spoken tech for your ears.
Tools are getting better, output is getting worse. Both are true.
Yeah, it's basically the great contradiction of where the whole industry is sitting right now. We've never actually had more raw capacity to build things, and yet product teams are just drowning in a sea of absolute noise.
Right. So we're taking a proper look today at a pretty massive stack of recent reading on product management and artificial intelligence. Just the two of us sitting here at the pub trying to nut out this core theme, which is really about how AI is fundamentally rewiring the way we build, and more importantly, who actually captures the value of all this frantic building.
Because it's not always who you think it is.
Exactly. And that is the exact puzzle we built Vocal Technologists to suss out for you. Just, no hype, just the actual mechanics of it. So let's just start with the giant awkward elephant in the room, the existential job anxiety.
Yeah, the quiet panic you hear in literally every product meeting right now.
Yeah, you see it on every developer and PM's face. They're looking at these tools just spitting out code and roadmaps, and they're wondering if a machine is about to make their mortgage payments a bit tricky. You read the headlines, and it feels like automation is coming for the white-collar world tomorrow.
It's a very visceral fear, for sure. But if we pull back and look at the analysis from veterans like Itamar Gilad in the reading, the reality of the threat is it's a lot more nuanced. Like, AI is absolutely going to hollow out the administrative routine tasks of product management.
The boring stuff.
Right, the boring stuff. But the immediate tangible threat to tech jobs isn't actually the algorithm. It's the broader macroeconomic weather.
See, I reckon I'd have assumed the opposite. We're all so busy looking over our shoulders at the latest model release that we're completely ignoring the cost of capital.
Yeah, that's the real bottleneck right now. I mean, interest rates and capital structures dictate headcount far more aggressively than an AI coding assistant ever does. But, if we isolate the AI side of the equation, what these tools actually do is drive the cost of technical execution down to near zero.
Wow. Okay, so it just makes the actual building part incredibly cheap.
Exactly. When generating a Python script or like a basic wireframe or even a marketing copy draft becomes practically free, the bottleneck of production shifts entirely.
It shifts away from the mechanics of how we build a thing to the strategic decision of what we should actually build in the first place.
Spot on. The scarce resources are now attention and judgment. It demands a total rewiring of how a product team operates. There's this fascinating argument from Andreessen Horowitz in these readings suggesting that, paradoxically, AI is the most human technology we've ever invented.
I read that piece, and I'll admit it sounded a bit dodgy at first. I mean, you instinctively think of AI as this cold, calculating, statistical engine. Calling it a human technology feels, I don't know, a bit like marketing spin.
I had the exact same initial reaction. But the underlying logic actually holds up. By stripping away the friction of technical expertise, the need to memorize syntax or navigate complex CAD software, AI democratizes the execution phase.
So it just lets normal people make stuff.
Right. It gives vastly more people the ability to turn a concept into a tangible artifact. And because anyone can execute, your unique individuality, your weird perspective, becomes significantly more valuable than your ability to just write clean code or secure permission from an engineering lead.
Okay, that makes heaps of sense. It elevates the core idea, which leads straight into this other principle from the stack, which is that taste cannot be delegated. I absolutely love this framing. An AI can spit out 100 different onboarding flows in 10 seconds, but it has absolutely no idea which one actually aligns with the company's strategic ambition.
Yeah, because it lacks the broader context. An AI operates in this vacuum of localized optimization. It doesn't understand the subtle, messy trade-offs between, say, introducing user friction to gather better data versus smoothing the flow out to boost immediate conversions.
It just does what you tell it to do.
Right. Strong product direction still requires a human leader to stare down that infinite sea of generated options, apply their taste, and make a definitive call.
It's almost like, imagine giving everyone on your street a fully equipped Michelin star commercial kitchen. Suddenly, the whole street is producing an infinite volume of meals, and the execution is flawless and super fast. But if you want to run a successful restaurant, you still need a head chef with actual refined taste to design a menu that people genuinely want to sit down and eat. Otherwise, it's just a high-volume, chaotic mess of random dishes.
That analogy tracks perfectly. The kitchen is running at absolute maximum efficiency, but efficiency without a coherent, human-directed vision is just noise.
Let me push back on this a bit, though. Is this concept of taste just a convenient excuse we're using to cope? Like, oh, the computer can code better than me, but it doesn't have my mysterious human intuition. Are we just clinging to an unquantifiable trait because we're terrified of being redundant?
It's the right question to ask, for sure. But taste in a product management context isn't about some mysterious aesthetic intuition. It's not just knowing what looks sleek on a screen. Taste is applied judgment.
Applied judgment. How so?
Well, it's knowing that your specific enterprise user base will completely abandon a workflow if it feels too consumer-focused. It's the hard synthesis of user empathy, market timing, and business constraints. I mean, an AI can optimize for a specific isolated metric, but a human with taste optimizes for the holistic reality of the market.
Right, because the AI doesn't know that your biggest competitor just launched a similar feature, so you need to pivot the messaging immediately. I
Okay.
get that. But this exact dynamic, the fact that execution is dirt cheap and we're relying heavily on our own judgment, it creates a massive operational trap. Because we can build things instantly now, we just do. And that sheer speed creates a dangerous illusion of structural progress.
Oh, absolutely. It's the classic prototype trap, but on steroids.
Yeah, the reading argues that a prototype should be treated as a question, not a product. But because these tools allow us to whip up highly polished, fully functioning prototypes in an afternoon, that visual polish really tricks our brains.
Human psychology is literally wired to associate visual fidelity with structural integrity. When a stakeholder looks at a prototype with perfect CSS and smooth animations, they subconsciously assume the backend database is scalable and the security protocols are all in place.
They treat it like a finished product.
Exactly. The team forgets to establish a clear decision framework. They stop asking, what specific hypothesis is this duct tape code trying to validate? Instead, it accidentally becomes a hard production commitment just because it looks pretty in a slide deck.
And that early momentum can mask some incredibly nasty structural flaws. The sources talk about reactors, where the initial burst of energy and excitement around a really fast build totally obscures the fundamental issues that will eventually just tank the product. You still need rigorous, boring testing to turn a shiny demo into reliable tech.
And we saw a high-stakes, very public failure of this exact mechanism recently with Meta.
Ah, right, the Muse image disaster.
Yeah, they released their first major superintelligence image generation tool, Muse Image, and they had to rip it offline after just 3 days.
Just 3 days, that is brutal.
It was, and the reason wasn't a technical failure in the image generation itself, it was a failure of judgment. It lacked clear, robust consent controls, which immediately sparked massive privacy fires.
Which is the textbook definition of cheap execution without applied taste. They have the raw computing power to generate the assets instantly, but they just didn't implement the necessary human guardrails before shipping it out to the public.
Exactly, which is why the operational frameworks for catching these things are more critical now than ever. The readings dig into the mechanics of code yellows.
I've heard the term code red, obviously, but how does a code yellow actually function in a modern team? Is it just a glorified bug ticket?
Not at all. A code yellow is a highly formal, transparent process for resolving a serious engineering threat before it escalates into an existential code red crisis. It's incredibly structured. You assign a single, decisive owner.
Okay, so someone is firmly on the hook.
Right. And you establish highly measurable exit criteria so you know exactly what metric needs to be hit to stand down the alert. And you enforce transparent, often daily communication across the whole org. It's designed to keep the response intense, focused, and strictly temporary so it doesn't just become the new, stressful status quo for the engineering team.
It's essentially an incident triage room to stop the prototype momentum from blowing up the company. Okay, so we've got all this speed, we're trying not to get tricked by polished prototypes, and we're managing the chaos with structured alerts. Traditionally, the way you navigate this kind of uncertainty is by gathering heaps of customer feedback. But the reading makes a really strong case that our traditional feedback loops are entirely broken in the AI era.
Yeah, they're breaking down because all our traditional product metrics were designed for static, deterministic software. Take Teresa Torres and her work on continuous discovery. She advocates heavily for rich, story-based interviews.
Walk me through the mechanics of that, because it sounds a bit like standard user research.
The distinction is crucial, though. Traditional behavioral data, time on page, click-through rates, bounce rates, that tells you what to investigate. It flags an anomaly, but it rarely tells you why it's happening or what you should actually build to fix it.
No, it gives you the symptom, not the cure.
It's exactly. A story-based interview doesn't ask a user, hey, what features do you want? It asks them to recount a specific recent experience. Like, tell me about the last time you tried to book a complex group holiday on our app. You are mining for the friction in their actual workflow, not their hypothetical preferences. And in an AI context, that qualitative depth is just non-negotiable.
Because the quantitative data is getting so muddy. And here's the part of the reading that genuinely threw me, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. AI outputs are non-deterministic. If I ask an AI feature to summarize a document and you ask it the exact same thing, we might get two completely different interfaces or formats back.
Which completely shatters the foundational logic of traditional A/B testing.
Right. If I'm a PM and I want to test a new AI travel agent, how on earth do I run a controlled experiment? If I send group A down one funnel, but the AI dynamically decides to show half of them a map and the other half a bulleted list based on their subtle prompt variations, my control group is shapeshifting in real time. I reckon traditional A/B testing is basically dead for these specific features.
Jeff Gothelf writes extensively about this exact crisis. You can't measure success by looking at aggregate clicks on a single feature, because the feature itself morphs per user. The standard dashboard is going to give you a totally incomplete, fractured picture.
So what's the tactical pivot there? You can't just fly blind and hope the model is doing a good job. And quickly, if you are finding this shift in how we actually measure and build things as fascinating as I am, take a quick second to hit subscribe on whatever feed you're listening to this on. We love picking these mechanics apart. But yeah, what is the pivot?
The pivot is moving away from measuring the isolated screen interaction and focusing entirely on the user's next action.
Give me an example of that in practice.
Sure. If the AI generates a complex project plan, you don't measure how long they looked at it. You measure what they did immediately after. Did they hit the copy to clipboard button? Did they instantly hit undo and start arguing with the prompt box?
Or did they just rage quit and close the tab?
Exactly. You have to build systems that capture a representative range of the actual messy outputs and tie those outputs directly to the user's immediate operational response.
Which honestly sounds like a massive headache to instrument. But the silver lining is that while the feedback loop is chaotic, the actual conversational interactions users are having with AI are generating the most explicit signal we've ever seen.
Absolutely. I mean, when a user spends 3 prompts trying to force a chatbot to format a table in a very specific way, they aren't just interacting with your product, they are explicitly handing you their exact intent and showing you precisely where your default experience is failing them.
It's an absolute goldmine of suppressed demand.
Yes, provided you have the architecture to actually capture and analyze those chat logs.
Right. But all right, let's look at the macro picture. We're gathering all this raw intent, we're shipping faster than ever, and we're dodging the prototype traps. How does this actually translate into commercial value? Because the companies positioned to win here are not the ones I would have guessed.
Yeah, the economic leverage of AI is highly counterintuitive. I think the natural assumption is that the big winners are the flashy foundation model labs or the massive tech aggregators, but the operational data suggests the most profound margin expansion might actually happen in boring traditional businesses.
Traditional businesses, like what logistics firms? I would have assumed Google or OpenAI captures all the margin here, not a freight company. Break the math down for me on that.
It comes down to the baseline economics of the industry. If you look at a high-margin software-as-a-service company, reducing their internal operational costs by, say, 5%, using AI is nice. It improves the balance sheet, but it doesn't fundamentally alter the trajectory or valuation of the business.
Right, because they already have huge margins.
But take a traditional low-margin business, freight logistics, traditional manufacturing, retail supply chains, their net profit margin might only be 3 or 4% total.
So they are operating on absolute razor-thin margins. Everything is tight.
Precisely. Now, if you embed AI into their existing middle management layer to automate routine coordination, like routing trucks, managing inventory spreadsheets, handling basic vendor emails, and you do this without requiring the frontline workers to learn a whole new software suite, you might drop their operational costs by that same 5%.
Oh, wow. But because their margin was only 3% to begin with, dropping costs by 5% literally doubles or triples their total profit.
The leverage is astronomical. It's not about building a flashy new consumer app. It's about a cement company using an agent to optimize their dispatch schedule, fundamentally changing the underlying economics of a legacy industry.
That is wild. And it really ties into this framework in the stack about moving software assets toward healthier economics. The whole cycle of incubate, compound, refinance, and liquidate.
It's a great mental model for understanding the life cycle of code.
I understand incubating a product and compounding its value by adding features over time, but what does it mean to refinance technical debt in this context?
Well, historically, when a code base got too old, bloated, and expensive to maintain, say, a massive, dusty legacy CRM built 10 years ago, you had to make a brutal choice. You either kept paying exorbitant maintenance costs or you spent millions rewriting it from scratch.
Yeah, the dreaded rewrite.
Exactly. AI changes that calculation and allows teams to essentially refinance that debt. You can use large language models to rapidly translate legacy code into modern frameworks, automate the QA testing, and drastically lower the ongoing cost of operating that asset before you eventually decide to liquidate or retire it.
So it's extending the profitable life of old software, but there is a catch to all this efficiency, isn't there? The sources warn about this concept of induced demand in engineering. You'd assume that if AI makes your dev team twice as fast, your product backlog would finally blessedly hit zero.
It never hits zero. In fact, it usually grows.
Because it's exactly like urban planning. Building a wider 10-lane highway doesn't eliminate traffic jams, it just induces more people to drive. When engineering gets cheaper and faster, the product team simply uncovers hidden demand. They look at the backlog and realize, hey, those 20 low ROI features we never had the resources to build are suddenly cheap enough to justify. And instantly, the pipeline is clogged again.
Yeah, the capacity gets absorbed almost immediately by previously suppressed demand.
But dealing with a long backlog isn't the real danger here. We have to talk about the massive flashing red warning sign buried in these architecture notes, the reverse information paradox.
If you were running an enterprise right now, this is arguably your most critical strategic vulnerability.
Let's pick the mechanics of this apart because it sounds severe. What exactly is the paradox?
Historically, a company's most defensible moat was its proprietary context, its internal processes, its localized data, the institutional memory of how things actually get done. But right now, across the globe, employees are bypassing internal systems and pasting that context directly into external third-party AI models to do their daily work.
They're feeding the company's specific knowledge into a public tool to get a faster result.
Yes, they are continually correcting the AI, refining its outputs, and teaching it the nuances of their specific industry. The paradox is that in the pursuit of immediate individual productivity, the enterprise is quietly bleeding its most valuable proprietary knowledge out to the model providers. The external AI gets smarter, and the enterprise loses control of its own context.
It's like having a lend of someone else's brain to do your homework for a year. You get top marks on all your assignments, but you slowly realize you've forgotten how to retain your own memories. When you finally lose access to that borrowed brain, you're left completely hollowed out.
That is a stark but entirely accurate way to view the risk. To survive this, modern enterprises have to fundamentally rethink their tech stack. They cannot rely entirely on external model providers for their intelligence. They have to architect systems where they own their context layer, their specific evaluations, and their organizational memory.
The stack brings up a company called Graphlet as an example of trying to solve this. How does a portable context layer actually work in practice?
Graphlet struggled a bit with finding their market position, but their architectural thesis was dead on. In a modern AI stack, you have to separate the reasoning engine, the LLM, from the memory. A portable context layer usually involves vector databases and retrieval-augmented generation.
Right, the RAG systems everyone is talking about.
Exactly. It means all your company's data, your historical decisions, and your proprietary context live in a secure internal vault.
So when an employee asks a question, the system pulls the relevant context from the internal vault, hands it to the external AI model just long enough to reason through the problem, and then takes the answer back.
Precisely. The external AI is just a disposable reasoning commodity you rent by the token. Your context layer is the durable asset you own. If a better reasoning model comes out next month, you just swap the brain out, and your institutional memory remains completely intact and secure.
Okay, that makes perfect architectural sense. We've covered a massive amount of ground here, from the macroeconomic pressures on PMs to the trap of polished prototypes, the nightmare of A/B testing fluid interfaces, and this desperate need to own your company's memory. But I want to pull all of this back down to the human element to finish up, because it is so easy to get lost in the architecture of vector databases and margin expansions.
Ultimately, all of this infrastructure only matters if it changes human outcomes. There is a brilliant note in the reading about data quality that highlights this perfectly. Data teams spend an exorbitant amount of time and money obsessing over clean, perfectly structured databases. They treat data purity as the ultimate end goal.
But a perfectly clean database has absolutely zero economic value just sitting on a server.
None. The forgotten and far more important metric is decision quality. Data teams shouldn't just be measuring the latency or purity of their pipelines. They need to work with product managers to define the specific human decisions that data is supposed to improve.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, if you have the most advanced AI agent in the world summarizing your analytics, but it doesn't change a single strategic decision your leadership team makes, the entire exercise is a failure.
Which ties perfectly into how we should be defining a strong product vision in this new era. It's very easy to just list a bunch of AI features on a roadmap and call it a vision. But looking at Roman Pichler's work in the stack, a real product vision isn't a list of technical capabilities or a financial revenue target. It's a clear articulation of the lasting, positive change you actually want to create in the market.
And that echoes Farabi's framework for building products that matter. In an era where execution is cheap and infinite prototypes are possible, the ultimate goal isn't just to capture a user's attention or shave 2 seconds off a workflow. The highest ambition of a product is to help the user flourish.
To flourish, I really like that word.
It requires deep, qualitative research, a shared sense of purpose, and an iterative, relentless focus on actual human well-being rather than just technical novelty.
Which feels like the exact right place to land this one. Because when you strip away the hype, the cheap execution, and the agents doing our homework, well, the real measure of this technology isn't whether it made your engineering team churn out code faster. It's whether it made your final human decisions any better. Vocal technologists, see you soon.
Spoken Tech for your ears.